Welcome to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions Podcast. I'm Graham Richmond, and this is your wiretaps for Monday, August 23rd, 2021. I'm joined by Alex Brown from Cornwall, England. Alex, how are things going?
Very good, thank you, Graham.
So I am now continuing my U.S. kind of journey here, and I'm now in the mountains. Well, I guess you could call them mountains, the Pocono Mountains, kind of north of Philadelphia. But it's been fun. We've been doing some hiking, and I got to visit a boulder field and all that kind of stuff, and we saw a snake. So it's been good, little vacation stuff with the family and everything. So enjoying it.
Was seeing a snake the highlight of your vacation?
Well, I think it was kind of interesting, and I can't remember what type it was now. It wasn't dangerous, but it was a big snake, so it was kind of fun.
Nice.
Yeah. So what's going on the MBA admissions side? I've noticed personally that I feel like I'm seeing some live wire entries. People are indicating like they've applied to Columbia early decision, or, there have been a few actually posts where people are saying they've been released from a wait list. So I guess finally some schools are emptying the wait lists out. But what about you? What have you been seeing?
Yeah, but also relatively quiet. I mean, as it is this time of year, still a lot of activity actually on ApplyWire. People sort of posting their profiles and sort of, obviously gearing up because, frankly, the deadlines are looming, Graham, for first round. So that's definitely the focus at this point, is getting ready for this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of which, we just published essay tips on the site for Georgetown, McDonough, Notre Dame, Rice, and UNC Kenan-Flagler. So those four schools, we've updated their essay topics and given our analysis on how you might approach those questions. I think as a lot of our listeners know, we do this for every school, or really all the top schools, and most of them have been up and out for quite some time. So those are some of the last ones that we're kind of getting together. We're sort of at the mercy of when the schools put out their essay questions in order for us to analyze them. We also have put up recommendation forms from schools in the last week. We've got ESA, Ross, Michigan, Toronto, Rotman, and UMD Smith. That's University of Maryland. So those rec forms are available in case you're applying to those schools and you want to know what on earth your recommenders are going to have to fill out. You can see it all on our website. And then, Alex, I'm kind of excited about this. We've been doing this series, as you know, called Real Numbers, and it sort of riffs on our other popular series, which are more Real Humans, where we do profiles of alumni from schools, or we have Real Humans students, where we talk to current students in top MBA programs. And so since it was the summer and we don't usually do any Real Human stuff, we did this Real Numbers series, and we just published one on finance placements, which I thought was kind of interesting. And all it is, it just shows the percentage of graduates from top schools who are going into finance or, kind of finance-related roles. And, as you'd expect, you've got some big guns leading the way with, anywhere from Wharton has 36% of the graduating class of 2020 heading into finance roles. You then have a whole bunch of schools in that 34% range. So you've got Cornell, Columbia, NYU, Stanford, and Harvard. And then it gets kind of interesting. You've got Ohio State, Fisher, with 32% of their graduating students from the class of 2020 going into finance. You've got Rochester, Simon at 31%, and then Booth is at 30%. So those are some of the big ones. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, any surprises or anything on that list.
No, it doesn't really surprise me. I mean, I know schools like Simon, that's a big focus of theirs. It doesn't surprise me that Cornell's very high up there. For example, a little bit interesting that Booth is only at around 30%, because that's obviously another school that we sort of align sort of big finance guns. But I assume it's more of a function of more folks wanting to go into tech. That sort of put more pressure on the numbers that ultimately end up going into finance. But yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me that much. Good to see Wharton at number one, Graham.
Now, do you think that geography plays a role? Do you think that, if you look at Wharton, Cornell, Rochester, Columbia, NYU, and even HBS, they're all in that kind of northeast corridor. And we know there's a ton of finance, obviously, in New York. I wonder if that plays a role at all in this, although Ohio State's at 32%. So I don't know if that's a factor or not.
Yeah, no, I would imagine a percentage of the folks out of Stanford are going into private equity.
Yeah.
And I assume that falls under the umbrella of finance.
Yeah, VC, PE, they're
Yeah,
both going to be in
yeah.
that. So that's why they're doing well there, probably. That's a good point. Anyway, those are fun pieces that we've been putting up there. And we've done, there's one on percentage of women in classes, minorities. We've just been doing them on kind of every and all topics that have numbers associated with them. So stay tuned. There'll be more of those. I did, Alex, sit down this past week with Donna Levinson, who's the Assistant Dean of Admissions at MIT Sloan. You'll recall she used to share that title with Rod Garcia, and now she's sort of the only one holding that title. So she's running all things admissions at MIT Sloan. And so Dennis, our esteemed producer, is going to be working that interview up into a podcast, and we'll get that out as soon as we can. If you haven't been listening or tuning in, we've got admissions director Q&As that we've aired on the podcast with Columbia, Wharton, Stanford, and Harvard. So MIT is coming up soon, so stay tuned for that. But that was fun.
Did she miss Rod?
I asked her, I'm like, how are things going? And she said she had breakfast with Rod like a week ago. And I said, well, what's he doing? Because he's probably retired, right? And she said, well, right now he's kind of taking inventory and kind of cleaning his house. So I guess, he's someone who traveled a ton, right? Obviously before the pandemic and everything. So it sounds like he's, enjoying the calm to kind of go through everything in his home and get things in order and stuff. I don't know if you've talked to him recently.
I haven't. I'm waiting for him to get back traveling again so we can go hang out in London.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. So anyway, stay tuned. I'm trying to schedule some other admissions director Q&As as well. The other thing, Alex, is we've got some events coming up in September. We've got one about switching careers, like using an MBA to switch careers, which we're going to do in conjunction with Georgia, the Terry School of Business. And that's on the 15th of September. And you can sign up for that on our website. We've also got the Essay Insights events coming on the 22nd, 29th of September, and the 6th of October. So those are like 3 consecutive Wednesdays, noon Eastern. The first one's going to have Berkeley, UNC, Columbia, Cornell, and Ross. Then we do another one on the 29th with UT Austin, UCLA, Duke, Tepper, and Yale. And then the last one features Stanford, Chicago Booth, NYU, INSEAD, and LBS. And you can actually sign up for those by just going to bit.ly/essay event series. And that's all lowercase. And it's one word. So yeah, sign up for those. Those are going to be fun. I love doing them. And then Alex will continue, obviously, to meet on Thursdays at noon to do Clubhouse, which it's been a lot of fun. And we continue to, just great to see all those familiar faces showing up and asking questions and stuff.
Yeah, we're number 5 club on Clubhouse for MBA related stuff.
Oh, well, how do you know that?
I counted. We are the 5th most membered club.
Oh, wow.
If that's the right term.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Yes.
So that's interesting. Yeah, it does seem like we have a lot of people in the club. I just hadn't realized that we were doing that well. That's excellent. And they've added some cool features to Clubhouse. Like, I don't know if you've noticed this, but people can message each other now, which they couldn't before. So yeah, it's been fun doing that. So we'll keep doing that every Thursday at noon. I've got bad news in that no one has reviewed this show in, a long time, it feels like. So I got nothing to report in that category. I guess everyone that listens has already written a review is my guess or my fear. But anyway, obviously, if people want to leave reviews, we'll take them.
Yeah.
Most people leave them on Apple Podcasts because that has the best kind of review platform. But we'll see. If you want to reach Alex Rye, you can always send us an email at info@clearadmit.com. Use the subject line wiretaps. So Alex, anything else before we get into the wiretaps portion? You've selected 3 great candidates with all kinds of cool admissions questions that kind of come out of their candidacies. But anything else you wanted to mention this week?
Yeah, quick shout out. Our admissions book, the 4th edition, is now available in the shop. So I would encourage anyone applying to business school to get it. I don't know if we're charging money for it or how that currently works right now, but it'd probably take you 2 hours to read it. Absolutely fantastic, brilliant. Yeah. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, and I think it is in the shop, and honestly, I don't know if it's free or if it's a few bucks, but it's definitely worth the read. And yeah, I think Alex, was sort of your huge contribution. You wrote this book. You spent a lot of time trying to like distill key bits of admission strategy into, like you said, an easily digestible book that just takes a couple hours to read. So this isn't one of those, 1,000-page tomes that just, you kind of wade through over months. This is really a good read. And I think, people who tune into this podcast get some of it, but I feel like what's great about the book is that it organizes things, and it's not, it's not case by case as we do with the podcast here. Yeah. So I think the two work really well together.
Yeah.
So without further ado, let's move on and get into Wiretap's candidate number 1. So this candidate is looking to start business school in the fall of 22, and they have 4 schools on their target list, and those schools are Cornell, Dartmouth, Duke, and Yale. They've been working, they have kind of 2 pre-MBA careers. So the first was in corporate social responsibility consulting. And then they actually moved country and have a job in the military since then. And I'll get into the details of that in a second. Post-MBA, they're hoping to get into consulting or maybe tech. And so they've got some companies on the list like Accenture, Bain, Deloitte, et cetera. GMAT score is 710. The GPA is 3.14. And this person has 3.5 years of work experience, currently located in Colorado. And they mention in the comments or in the notes that they are originally from China, and they moved to the US with their family about 4.5 years ago. And what they did when they arrived is they signed up, I guess they naturalized and then signed up to serve in the US Army. And they've been working as a financial management analyst for the last 2.5 years in the Army. Before they moved from China, they were doing corporate social responsibility consulting for about a year. And they want to shift their career back into that domain with an MBA after the Army. So both bachelor's and master's degrees have been earned in mining engineering in China, and they have a GPA of 3.14, as I said, in the undergrad and 3.8 in their master's degree. So Alex, this is kind of an interesting case, but what do you make of this candidacy?
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting aspects to this case. I think on the one hand, this candidate's come far. So they're from China. Looks like they're from a rural piece of China. They're the second child in their family, which complicates matters in terms of the China policy at the time. And they were, I think they were the first female to go to the school that they went to, or whatever. Whatever the issue is. So there's a lot of stuff that clearly this candidate's had to deal with and their families had to deal with that we regular folks haven't had to deal with, which is super interesting. You say their GPA is 3.14, or at least they report their GPA undergrad is 3.14, but they were ranked 3rd out of 27 in their class. So I imagine their school just doesn't have grade inflation, otherwise it probably would be a bit of a higher GPA. So I'd be a bit cautious about how they articulate their GPA and make sure that they include their class rank in that reporting. They've gone on and completed a master's degree. It's unclear to me if that was directly after undergrad, or I assume it was, or after a little work experience. But these undergrad and grad degrees are in mining engineering, so not necessarily a trivial degree by far. So there's some interesting aspects there, I think, to weave the story. They've come with their family to the US. They actually had to go through the process of getting their naturalization, so that took them a couple of years. So there's a dwell time of 2 years where they weren't fully employed before they then entered the Army as I think you said, in a financial management analyst role. They did a year's of work experience in China before they came. That was in corporate social responsibility. And they want to get back into that domain post MBA. So they're going to have to do a good job of articulating this 2-year period where they weren't fully employed, to show that, they didn't just stand still, they were doing things and contributing and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, I think there's a pretty interesting story to tell here, Graham, and if they can get that story out, do a good job with their app execution, they might, they might well and find a good spot. They're targeting sort of top 16 programs, which I think is quite ambitious in this case. They might want to look at some top 22 just to sort of make sure they do land in an MBA, because it does look like to me, Graham, that an MBA will serve them well to sort of transition back into civilian life, back into the domain they want to return to, corporate social responsibility. Anyway, that's my long response.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of good points there. I want to add a couple. So number one, I'm pretty bullish on this candidacy in the sense that, ranked 3 out of 27 in an engineering type curriculum, and the only female in her class. And so, and the story of being saved from abortion as a second child that she sort of mentions in the comments, there's a lot of interesting kind of background here. But I do agree this gap that they have when when she arrives in the U.S. and tries to go into the military, but there's this background checking period and waiting period, obviously. So that, that's got to be explained. And I think there's a good lesson here for everyone tuning in, which is that if you have a gap in employment, obviously you got to be out in front and explain it. But I want to be careful in terms of some people will say, oh, I use that year to prep and take the GMAT, or something. And that's bad. Obviously it's good to use that year to do that, but it's not a good thing to use your application to explain that you had time, downtime, and you used it to kind of prep for the test. Because remember, most people applying to business school aren't afforded that luxury of having downtime to prep just for the exam. So you have to be strategic, right? But I think she did indicate that she was working in a pet shop and in a cafe, and so trying to make ends meet and keep busy. So hopefully she can sort of, just explain that she wasn't sitting on the couch or wasn't just kind of, prepping for a test or something during that time period. But I really like this candidacy, and I think that the 3.8 in the master's degree should be worth something too. So I don't know, we'll see. I was almost going to say when I first looked at the profile that it could be worth a little bit of taking a flyer on a very top school. She has some really top schools on her list, but I was even thinking boy, is there a school that's great for CSR that's not on our list? Maybe it's, Berkeley, or I don't know if she has some geographic restrictions or not, but I just wondered whether, should there be an M7 type school on the list or something even, in that group generally. I don't know if you agree with that or not, because she does have, there's some numbers problems and the gap and stuff. So it's a bit of it's challenging.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. This is I would say it's sort of a risky profile. It's high risk, potentially high return, depending on, like you say, how they deal with that 2-year gap. Also, we shouldn't dismiss this current experience with the Army. They're going to need to get super recommendations, show that they've really done well once they hit the ground running in the US and got the role that they were seeking, and so on and so forth. So really doing very well at work, showing their impact, that to me is going to be fundamental. And if they can really show that, then yeah, maybe they need to look at the likes of Haas or an M7. I'll make that distinction because Haas hasn't quite joined the M8 yet.
Yes.
But yeah, I do though caution that having that sort of 1 or 2 in that top 20 might be necessary because of this gap if it's not well dealt well with and so forth.
Yeah, so I think the key thing with this candidacy is going to be have a range of schools that they target. And right now, the schools on her list they're all kind of in the same bucket pretty much, like you said, top 16.
Yeah.
So yeah, it might be worth thinking about adding one a little bit further down the list and maybe one a little bit up on the list. So in any event, I love this candidacy. I think it has some, trouble spots that need to be properly, explained, and the applications have to be really well executed. But I'm a fan, and I want to thank her for sharing her profile on the site. So best of luck.
I think they're planning to retake the GMAT too.
Yeah.
So any movement on that's going to be helpful.
Agreed. Yeah. So thanks so much for that post and for picking it out, Alex. Let's move on and talk about Wiretaps candidate number 2. So this is another ApplyWire entry that we received, and again, the candidate wants to start in fall of 22. They've got 8 schools on the list, which include Columbia, Harvard, HEC Paris, LBS, Michigan, Chicago, Darden, and Yale. And this person's been working in public policy pre-business school, and they want to pivot into consulting. They also list investment banking as a possibility, but it seems like it's more consulting because the companies that they list as targets are Bain, BCG, and McKinsey. The GMAT score is a 760, GPA 3.7, and they have 5 years of work experience. They want to land in North America after business school. They are currently in Canada. And the wrinkle with this candidacy is that this person is originally from India, but moved to Canada for undergrad and then stayed on and went to University of Toronto to do what sounds like public policy, like a master's degree. And they've been working with various kind of government-related institutions, and I guess they said first as a bureaucrat and now as a consultant at one of Canada's leading banks. So they mentioned that they've had some work with the governments of Israel. They've worked with obviously Canada, India. So kind of an interesting background, and they indicate that in the next phase of their career they want to learn more about the private sector and specifically how firms think about market expansion and growth. So there's another wrinkle too, Alex, which is that they have an admit from HEC Paris, and now they're thinking of kind of maybe expanding and applying to some additional schools, and they wanted to know what we think, of their chances. And so I'm going to ask you a question. I want your thoughts on the candidacy overall, but I also wanted to know, is this an Indian candidate? Because they moved from India to Canada to go to undergrad and then have stayed. Or is this going to be viewed differently? So is this person overrepresented or not?
Again, in cases like this, I always think the candidate should just presume that they're going to be considered overrepresented, because if you assume that, then you're going to certainly do the right things in terms of get your candidacy in round one, make sure that you're not delaying stuff. Obviously, once your application's completely ready, because she I believe this is a woman, but I don't know that, but I believe it. Because they have an admit at HEC Paris, they've really no excuse not being in the first rounds anyway, right? So they must have, all their ducks in a row already. Ridiculous numbers, 760 GMAT, absolutely fantastic. I think, Graham, that this candidate is pretty outstanding, quite frankly, whether they're overrepresented or not. With great execution on their applications, they should get some really interesting opportunities. Their goal is to be in North America post-MBA, so HEC Paris might not be the best option for them from that particular perspective. So kudos for them for applying to M7 type programs based in the US, as well as Darden, Yale, and so forth. I'm guessing that their experience to date is strong. It will be backed up by strong recs, I'm assuming, in that sort of public policy domain. Looks like they've done some interesting things. They're also well engaged in their communities and so forth, so they're doing some interesting things outside of work. I think their plans, it is management consulting in the short run, which makes perfect sense for a public policy type person. And then, and I push them on this a little bit to make sure, even in the long run, I know when we've given advice about long run goals, they don't have to be as focused. But rather than just say, I want to work on the intersection of public and private commerce, it's really, what is the niche? What are you going after? And they articulated that very well too. So, like anyone, if you're coming from an overrepresented population, schools are going to want to accept a number of folks from these overrepresented populations because they want to have a class that mirrors the world, right? So, at the end of the day, even if this person does fit in that bucket, Graham, I reckon this is a sort of person is the cream that rises to the top.
Yeah, and I as I was looking at the profile, on the website, I was thinking about how, if this is a woman working in public policy who's done both undergrad and grad degrees in Canada, I just, with every kind of little detail that was offered, I realized that they were kind of one step further removed from maybe the stereotypical Indian candidate applying from India. So I think that even if they are overrepresented, they're going to, as you say, rise to the top, especially with those numbers, 760, 37. Hard to kind of avoid those. Those are really great numbers that I think any admissions officer will take note of. And I think they're going to have good recommendations. And I feel like this person is going to get into multiple schools on their list. And even if let's ignore the international schools and focus on, Columbia, Harvard, Michigan, Chicago, Darden, and Yale, I think this person is going to get into multiple of those schools. And if they want to land in North America long term, it's hard to argue with, joining one of those programs. So, I feel really confident about this candidacy, assuming, strong recs and good execution on the essays and applications. But I would apply early. I'm wondering if their offer for HEC isn't to start in January or something. Doesn't HEC have 2 different start dates? So I wonder if they need to kind of get this figured out sooner rather than later, or if maybe they have some kind of deferred offer for next fall at HEC. So in any event, a great candidacy, and I think there are great things ahead for them, and they're going to have a lot of success in this process.
Yeah, completely agree.
So thanks to them for sharing. And I do think it is a woman, as you pointed out, because they indicate they, belong to a women's mentoring association when they were at college. So in any event, lots to like about this candidacy.
They're also a podcaster, Graham. Is that good or bad?
Well, I think it's good. I love podcasting. But no, I do think that was an interesting tidbit too. Yeah, they led I think a politics podcast from out of their university, maybe as part of their master's or undergrad. I'm not sure, but very cool stuff. We like podcasters, at least I do.
Yeah, we got to like podcasters.
Yeah. So, all right, let's move on and talk about Wiretap's candidate number 3. So this is another ApplyWire entry received, and it's different in the sense that this person might be the first that I've seen, or certainly that we've reviewed on the show, who wants to start in the fall of 25. So we're several years away here. And this person has a list of 10 schools that they're currently considering, and they are Carnegie Mellon, Cornell, Dartmouth, Duke, Michigan, NYU, Washington Foster, UNC, UT Austin, and UVA. And this person's in Army Infantry at the moment, and they would love to pivot into a kind of career in tech after business school. The GMAT score that they have is a 700. Their GPA is a 3.15, and they've been working for 3.5 years. They're in Austin, and they want to land ideally in New York, but they're also open to San Francisco. And they got specific in their comments and mentioned that they would like to work as either a PM or PMM in New York or San Francisco. And Alex, I got to be honest, I knew that PM stood for product management or something, but I wasn't sure about PMM because I'm just not always up on the acronyms. So I had to look it up, and that stands for Product Marketing Manager. So in any event, that's kind of their goal. What do you make of this candidacy? They're a long ways out. The numbers don't jump off the page, but what's your take on this?
Well, actually, I like this candidate for the very reason that they posted on ApplyWire 2 or 3 years before they're actually applying. So it gives them a good runway to really make sure that they optimize their candidacy. So I think, we should start featuring this. This is kind of a techie thing, right? We've got to optimize. So I really like that. And they in their comments, they basically said, I'm really focused now on doing really well in the Army, building up a strong resume, and so on and so forth. So kudos. That's really what's in your control now, is doing a great job at whatever you're currently doing and seeking out the opportunities to further that, and so on and so forth. So anyone that's applying a year or two ahead of time, really push yourself, really seek out those opportunities to challenge yourself so that you can show in the application your successes and your contributions, your impact, and so on and so forth. So I really like that. Their GMATs, they got a 700. They're going to retake it. They've been sort of hitting the 750s on trial tests, but they've got plenty of time to do that. So again, they're thinking ahead. They can adjust that. The outlier here is going to be this GPA at 315, which puts a bit more pressure on them to get the better GMAT score potentially. Might also be an opportunity for them, Graham, to do MBA Math or HBS Core or something, just something else that shows their self-awareness and also their readiness and preparedness for when they come out of the military to the MBA, that they take that. So maybe they want to do that just before they actually apply. So that would be good. They're learning Python. That kind of stuff's important if they want to get into product management. So a lot of those types of roles are going to absolutely require you to have some kind of real technical background, which maybe they already have, and maybe they're already doing stuff like that in the Army. But picking up these languages along the way, whether it's Python or R or whatever it might be, has to also be helpful. So I'm quite bullish simply because they're planning ahead. They have an opportunity to improve their candidacy over the next 2 or 3 years, Graham.
So, yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. I did want to mention the snake that I saw up here was not a python. You just reminded me when you mentioned python. And I believe it came to me, I believe it was something called a milk snake. So, but in any event, I did want to make a point on this one with respect to their GMAT. So they have this GMAT score of 700, which, is kind of below the average at some of the very top schools, but still a good score. But what's interesting about their scores, they actually hit the 74th percentile in math and the 84th percentile in verbal. So it's a really balanced score overall. I do think that given how long it will be before they apply, that they owe it to themselves to do like a 6-month immersion with a tutor or whatever it takes to kind of aim to retake that test and get a very high score. I also learned something in reading this post, which is they kept referring to the fact that they might retake the test when they're closer to ETSing. And I was like, okay. So ETS are the people for me that make the GRE exam, but they were talking about the GMAT. So I was very confused. So I had to look this up. And this is because I'm not a military person, but it turns out that ETSing stands for expiration term of service. So the ETS date is the last day of a service member's contract. So I didn't understand what they were talking about, and now I do. So they were just sort of pointing out that they'll probably retake the test when they get close to finishing their term of service contract with the military. I would argue, though, that they may want to do it sooner rather than later because, typically you would apply to business school like a year ahead of when you're going to attend. And if they want to line things up such that their military service ends around the time they go off to business school. Anyway, take the test early if you can, prep for it, get a really high score because that'll help to kind of counter the sort of GPA issue that they face. I do agree with you. I think they mentioned in their notes that they're already in the top. I guess they get periodic rankings of where they fall amongst other officers, and they're in the top 5 to 25% on all these different rankings that they've been receiving in their early career. So hopefully they'll keep doing well in their role. And I do think, though, that just going back over this, number one, we see fewer candidates from infantry going into business school. So it's a bit of a bootstrapper kind of profile potentially, as opposed to someone coming out of the service academies or whatever. But I still think that GPA of 3.15 will need an explanation and ideally will be paired with a higher test score if they want to open doors at the types of schools they have on their list. But other than that, I mean, they've got time, and I think it's terrific, like you say, that they're planning ahead. So, and I did want to thank them for their service, and we probably should have thanked the woman who's working in the military too. I forgot to mention that earlier, but this is an interesting case just because they have so much time. And the only thing I was going to ask you is, do you think it matters that they're an officer in Army infantry? They want to get into tech. Like, what do you think of that kind of transition? And is it enough to say, well, I took Python, or is there more that they need to be doing to suggest that they have that ability to jump from military into a tech kind of role?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it does depend on their prior background,
Yeah.
what they did in college. Maybe they've done some stuff there. And maybe what they're doing in the Army too. I don't know specifically what their role is, and whether someone in the infantry also, they might have roles in supply chain or other sort of related areas that have become much more tech focused. So So, I know we've talked before about folks in the military, and they've been working on sort of cybersecurity stuff and stuff like that. I don't know if that's relevant in this case, but yeah, they're going to have some signals in their background for an affinity for this stuff at least.
Right, because we often see military folks saying they want to get into consulting as a way to kind of take all the tools that they learn in business school and sort of apply them before then taking a leap into a specific industry.
Yeah.
Or we see people who have a real operations kind of focus due to maybe what they've been doing in the military and thinking that applies nicely. But yeah, I just want to encourage this person to continue to pursue those programming languages, like you said, and just to sort of build that piece of their profile that suggests a kind of tech savvy and an interest in tech. So, but again, this is a good candidacy in that they have a lot of time, and frankly, if they can hit the GMAT out of the park when they retake it, I feel like there's no reason that the schools on their list are not within reach. Again, they're doing well in their role in the military, and so there's a lot to like here. They just got to work on that test because the GPA is an issue otherwise.
Yeah, completely agree.
So, Alex, is there anything else? I want to thank that person for posting. We've done our 3 candidacies for this week's edition of Wiretap. So is there anything else you wanted to add this week, or are you willing to do it again next week?
Yeah, I think we'll just do it again next week, Ryan.
All right, that sounds good.
Very good.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Yeah, best of luck. Stay safe, everyone.